Hello everyone, welcome to the video on how to prepare for the Christ entrance test. My name is Alpesh and I'm going to take you through how to go about and how to prepare for the entrance test. So, before we move on to how to prepare for the entrance test, let us look at the 4-point agenda that we will be following for this video. The first thing that we would be covering is the selection process for Christ. To crack any entrance test, there are a couple of things that is very important. You should know what is the process and you should know the pattern of the test. Once we know that, we can then find out our plan, we can then make a plan and then go ahead with the preparation. So, the first thing that we will look at is the selection process for Christ. The second thing that we will look at is the Christ paper pattern. The third thing that we will look at is the preparation plan for the various sections, and finally the overall strategy to crack the Christ entrance test. So let us first look at the selection process for the Christ entrance test. So if you look at the selection process, this is the first year when now the test is going to be an online test at a particular venue. Up till now, what used to happen was you could take that test from the comfort of your home. But now, starting this year, they have changed this. They will give you a time slot, they will give you a venue. So you need to take a test at a particular venue. This test is going to be conducted in 2 rounds, meaning you will have 2 options of taking this test or 2 chances of taking the test. The admissions are given or offered after every round. So after you take the first test or the first chance, there is a possibility you can get an admission and you need not then take the second test. The deadline to apply for the first round is 30th of March. The first test will be conducted on 7th April 2024 and the process also includes a micro presentation and a PI process. This second round of the selection will happen between 14th April to 17th April. So understand one thing, it is not only the test that is important, the micro presentation and the PI process is a second stage which is equally important. Okay, so this were the deadlines for the first test. Now let us look at the deadline for the second chance of taking the test. The deadline to apply for the second round is 4th May. The round 2 entrance test will be conducted on 11th May. And the micro presentation and PI process will happen anywhere between 14th to 17th May. So all the students have to undergo through both the steps and admissions are offered based on the composite score of the entrance test, the micro presentation and the personal interview that you take. So based on your test score, based on your micro presentation and based on your PI, the personal interview, there will be a composite score based on which the admission will be given. So once now I know what is the selection process, let us first look at the paper pattern for Christ. This is the paper pattern for Christ. As you can see, it is divided into 5 sections, or in fact there are 6 sections. The first is a fundamental accounting. On an approximation, you get 10 questions. The second is an English language or the verbal skills, which is 25 questions. Then you have general knowledge, which is 20 questions. Then you have maths or quantitative aptitude, which is 20 questions. Reasoning, which is 25 questions. And data interpretation and analysis, which is 20 questions. So if you check, you have a total of 120 questions and you will be given 90 minutes for this 120 questions. Now, before we go on and look at the various sections, there are few important things that you will have to remember. There are, as I just said, there are 120 questions and you will be given 90 minutes to attempt this 120 question. But the important part here is questions are presented in a random order and they are not going to come section wise. So though we have listed the sections, it is not a sectional test. Remember, your first question could be from math, the second could be from LR, the third could be from verbal, followed by maths again, then a GK, then an accounting question and so on. So it's a jumbled up or a random test and there are no sections in this test. Okay. Every right answer will fetch you 1 mark and every wrong answer you will get a minus 0.25. Remember one more thing, there are no calculators available in this test. However, where do you think you can use calculator? If you look at the analysis of the Christ entrance test, mostly the last section that we talked about, the data interpretation section, has a little bit more of calculation oriented question. Maybe you need a calculator there, but remember there is no calculator available for the test. So as I said, I have 120 questions, 90 minutes. What do you think would be a good score? A good score would be anything in the range of 70 to 80 plus. Now, for me to achieve 70 to 80, I will have to attempt a minimum of 90 to 100 questions. And since the overall level of difficulty of this test is not very high, I'm saying you can easily attempt anywhere around 90 plus questions. And if you attempt a 90 question with an accuracy of 85%, I don't think you will get it difficult to score somewhere in that range of 70 to 80. Okay, so these are few important things as you can see on the screen. So first, very important thing, questions are presented in a random order. They are not sectional wise. Please keep that in mind. Now, once I now know the exam pattern, let us look at the prep strategy for the cont section. So if you look at the Christ test, you will see that these are the topics which you get very, very frequently. So if you just overall look at the topics, you will realize the test is more of arithmetic based. Okay, so you get questions on percentages, profit and loss, simple interest, compound interest, time and work, time, speed, distance. There are questions on statistics also. Statistics is a very, very important part as far as cont is concerned. But these are the major areas which has been tested. So I'm not saying that if you look at these topics, geometry is not there. So I'm not saying you should not do geometry. But the important thing is, first and the foremost, you should be very, very thorough with these topics. Once you are done with these topics, then yes, you can go ahead with the other topics which are missing, like a geometry or an algebra and so on, or a number system also. Okay. So first thing, have a mastery in this area. Okay. If you look at the level of difficulty of the cont questions, they are mostly easily to moderate. I know I have 20 questions. That means on an average, I can spend around 1 minute per question on the cont questions. Okay. So out of 20 questions, I'm looking at attempting anywhere close to 15 questions in this section, which is a possibility. So if I want to improve my cont, what should I be doing? In your plan, please make sure that for every chapter, you solve a minimum of 2 exercises. If you solve 2 exercises per chapter, I'm sure that the type of cont that you get in the entrance test would become a little easier for you. Let's look at the English section now. If you look at the English section, these are the areas that you get. So you get a question on reading comprehension. Mostly there is one paragraph that you get or one comprehension that you get, based on which there will be either 4 or 5 questions. You get questions based on grammar, you get questions based on vocabulary, you get questions based on parajumbles, and you get questions based on word substitutions in a given sentence. Okay, so these are the areas which are majorly tested in Christ. Once again, there will be other areas, but these are the main areas that you need to focus on to crack the entrance test. So if I look at the type of questions that come in English, they are very, very easy compared to math, which I said was from easy to moderate. So the type of questions that you get in English are comparatively easier. Okay. And I don't see you spending. There are 25 questions. I think around 45 seconds per question should be much more than sufficient to answer the English question. Out of 25, if you can attempt somewhere around 22 questions, I think you have done justice to the English section. Now, how do I prepare for English? As I can see, the questions are more of grammar based, the more of reading comprehension and vocab based questions. So if possible, make a habit of reading or solving one reading comprehension passage on a daily basis. And if you can solve around 10 to 20 new words, if you can learn 10 to 20 new words daily, that will really help. Okay. And yes, there are some grammar rules which you will have to do. So this is something that you will have to prepare for English. Let's look at the next section, which is logical reasoning. So the types of questions that you get under logical reasoning is logical series and odd man out, coding, decoding, directions, Venn diagram, arrangement based questions, meaning linear arrangement, circular arrangement, matrix arrangement. Then there are some verbal reasoning questions also which are present here. So out of 25 questions, around 16 to 17 questions will be from logical reasoning and the remaining 8 questions will be from verbal reasoning. What are the type of questions that you get here? You get cause and effect, you get statement conclusion, you get syllogisms and analogy types of questions here. So if you look at the preparation plan for logical reasoning, okay, what you need to do is, see, LR is one section. Try to understand one thing. LR is one section wherein you can get good accuracy. And these types of questions don't take much time to solve also. So you should be spending somewhere around 45 seconds per question here. Again, the level of difficulty of the logical reasoning questions are relatively easier. Hence, I think 45 seconds on an average per question should be good enough. Okay, so just like as I said for maths, what you need to do is pick up every chapter, solve a minimum of 2 exercises. Let's say each exercise should have around 20 questions. So around 40 questions on that particular area or that particular chapter should be good enough for you. Another important thing here is, remember, you need to attempt around 22 questions out of 25. A good attempt here would be around 22 questions. Let's look at GK. Now, GK is something that you can't say that I will prepare for last 7 days or last 10 days and go ahead with it. No, GK, you will be good enough in GK if you spend relatively much more time on it. So my suggestion would be, just like as I said for verbal, see if you can read passages on a daily basis. See if you can read or do vocab on a daily basis. The same way, can you spend around 30 minutes on GK on a daily basis? That is something that is very important. Now, you might ask me a question. How many months GK should I prepare? Ideally, 6 to 8 months is much more than sufficient. So your first aim should be to start from, let's say, a Jan 2024. Start reading newspapers, start reading magazines. Any events that has happened since Jan 2024 should be a good enough one. So in GK, you not only get current affairs, but you also get general knowledge questions. Okay. Again, the type of questions would be easy to moderate. I don't think in GK for any question you will need 30 seconds or more than that. Okay. Because it's either you know or you don't know it. There's nothing that you will think on it. Okay. Out of 20 questions of GK, if you attempt around 16 questions, I think it's a good enough attempt. So get into that habit of reading your newspapers on a daily basis. And if you can get weekly current affairs, I think that will be the best thing to read. Let's move on to the plan for the fundamental accountancy sections. So whatever you have learned in your economics and accounts till class 12, I think it's much more than sufficient. The type of questions that you get here is just going to check your basic clarity on accounts and economics. There is nothing much, only 10 questions. I would suggest go ahead and spend approximately 30 seconds once again on this type of questions should be much more than sufficient. The type of questions, as I just said, your 12th standard economics and accounts, debentures, liquidity ratio, these are topics that you get. A good attempt of around 7 to 8 out of 10 would be a good attempt. Another thing that you need to remember is, up till now, what we were doing in economics and accounts, especially in economics, was writing long answers. Get used to or try solving MCQ questions on economics and accounts, because this is something different from what you would have already done in your 12th standard. So important thing is, get hold of some MCQ material in economics and accounts and start solving them. The last thing is data interpretation. Once again, there is absolutely nothing new in DI. If you look at DI, there are various types of data interpretation questions that you get. But if you look at the Christ entrance test, most of their questions will revolve around bar graph and line graphs only. Okay, the concepts that are tested in data interpretation are more to do with percentages, profit and loss, simple interest, compound interest, ratios, averages. So these are basic concepts which you have already done in your quant, which you would have done in your quant. So My suggestion here would be, once you have completed with percentages, ratios and averages, then solve as many DI sets as you can, because there are no new concepts that you will get here. Get hold of your bar graphs, get hold of your line graphs. So again, I'm saying these are not the only areas. There are pie diagrams also, solve them also. But first thing is bar graph and line graphs, because this is something that has been regularly coming up in your entrance test. Let us look at now the overall strategy for the entrance test. Now, the first thing that I want to do is, whenever you start your preparation, get hold of or go through the last year's analysis. We have done the Christ analysis of 2023. You will get the link in the description box. Go through it first. That's the first thing. That will give you an idea of how many questions came from which area, and that will give you an idea of which areas are important, which areas can you skip, which I have already told you also. Okay, so that is something very, very important. Now, look into the basic concepts. Start solving the basic concepts. As I said, HCF, LCM, solve questions, solve around 20-30 questions of those areas. Start solving linear arrangement questions, start solving coding, decoding, keep doing your GK on a daily basis. So get your basic concepts clear. Important thing, do not study section wise. Now, what do I mean by this? When I say do not study section wise, I don't mean finish off the maths first and then move on to LR, or finish off complete NR, then move on to verbal. Please don't do that. It's always a mix that you will have to look out for. Look out for maths and maybe an English on that particular day, LR and an accounts as particular day. So keep one heavy subject, one lighter subject. That heavy and lighter for you would be different areas. So identify, if maths is heavy, can I do a English, or can I do an accounts, or can I do an LR along with that? So always mix. Do 2 chapters from maths, 2 chapters from LR, 2 from verbal, then again get into maths, do a little bit of accounts, and definitely GK is daily. So this is what I want you to do. Once your concept is over, get into practice mode. So you will have to practice as many questions as you can. Once your concept is over, get into the practice mode. Once you get into practice mode, you will realize that there is something that you need to redo. Some areas that you need to redo. Redo that. Absolutely fine. Nothing wrong. Then start taking sim test. Now, ideally, my suggestion would be take 5 sim tests for Christ entrance test. That should be sufficient. But if you are taking both the rounds, then my suggestion would be take 3 tests in the first round and keep the remaining 2 for the second round. If you are sure of taking only 1 attempt, then take all the 5 tests at this stage. Okay, so 5 tests is a bare minimum which I think you should take. Now, what will this test do? It will help us to find out, what is my area of strength, what are my weaknesses. So, once you find out your area of strength or area of weakness, you can then go ahead and analyze your test. So, start taking mocks once you have done with the practice module. Now, when you are taking a test, one important thing is your decision making has to be between 15 to 20 seconds. That means I read my question, I don't understand anything. Please do not go on to read the question again. Just leave it, move on. There are 120 questions. I'm sure once you start moving, and I know there are 90 minutes, try to reach the end of the section by the 80 minutes. The last 10 minutes is going to be a buffer for you. So there are some questions, you can keep a note of it. Go ahead and then solve those 10 questions or a few questions that you would have marked in the last 10 minutes. Okay, so decide in the first 15-20 seconds, decide in that first reading itself, do you think you want to go ahead with that or just skip and move ahead? If the concepts, as I just said, is not known, I would suggest simply skip the question. Do not go on to reading that test again. Another important thing, do not do guesswork. There are negative markings. So unless you eliminate 2 options and you are left with 2 options and then you want to do it, then still you can go ahead. But if I am not able to eliminate any option, please do not do any guesswork. Okay? During your preparation, you would have realized your area of strength. You see your questions based on your area of strength, try to make sure that you solve maximum area questions of those area. Okay, but that does not mean that, let's just assume that probability and permutation combination is my weak area. Make sure that you have the basics of that, because as I said, if you look at the type of questions that you get in permutation combination or in the Christ entrance test, majority of the questions are easy to moderate. So even if I feel probability is difficult for me, make sure that you solve very, very basic questions on probability, so that in the exam, if I get a very easy question, I don't miss out on those type of very easy questions. Okay, and as I said, and I'm once again saying the same thing, current affairs and general knowledge has to be in the daily basis. So this is your strategy for the Christ entrance test. Just do it properly and I'm sure you will crack the test. All the best.